Welcome. So the Trident model is an important model I want to explain. It's about the private sector. Since the private sector is such a large part of our economy, there's a bunch of important money flows that we have to understand about. So the reason I called it the Trident model is just the shape of it. So you have revenue coming into a business, and then what I do from there is there's one money split that comes out here, and I'll just call that costs. And so this is things like electricity and or like inputs. So if you're a steel maker, it might be the cost of the iron ore coming in. So you get your revenues, and then you get what I call primary profit. Now then, that primary profit goes to one of three things. Now you might be able to see why I call it the Trident model, because it looks like a little trident spear. And there's, well, the three things it goes to is what we'll call it profit. I call it secondary profit. But what you would traditionally think of as profit, then there's an amount of money that gets spent on capital, and then there's an amount of money that goes to wages. Now in this, where we're talking about the private sector here, we're talking about, like, for a country like Australia, the whole private sector. So this isn't a single company or anything like that. It could be kind of taken to an extent as like a really large company, but largely it's like bigger than companies. It's even bigger than sectors. Like this is more this sort of what goes on, and the split between, the important thing is the split between where the money's going to these three things. And that can vary from, like, in the construction sector it might be one sort of split, and in the tourism it might be another, and so on and so forth. But largely this is a thing that happened, really what it's about is what's going on across all the private sector, and it's over long periods of time. Like the shortest window of time we'd be looking here where this split changes is like an election cycle. But really we're talking more like over decades, 2 or 3 or 4 decades or whatever, changes in the way this primary profit, which comes after you subtract your costs from your revenue, gets split amongst secondary profit, capital and wages. And these things happen slowly and over time, but there is trends that happen to it. So I'm just taking a look at my notes at the moment. So the money comes in and it can be split, and let's just say I don't know, of your primary profit, let's just say we'll go 40% goes to capital, 40% goes to capital and repairs, 40% to wages, and that leaves 20% going out this path. And then there's deadbands that this can operate within. I don't know if these figures are accurate actually, but let's just use those for examples. There's deadbands, which is over time they can sort of swing up and down inside a range and it won't cause any problems. However, you can go outside of those ranges and then you will start to get problems. So just one other thing I'm going to do. So this comes back to the people or population. And that goes around, ends up being your demand, which gives you your revenue. So what's happening at the moment is that there's been a trend in society, and that's that profit is a super duper important thing in our economy, and that's like your economy. They mainstream economics is going. They don't subscribe to my productivity is where wealth comes from. They've got their own weird things, and so which they subscribe to, basically profit is the king of everything, and your economy will go better if you get more profit. So they've encouraged like law changes and cultural changes in our society such that private businesses' profits goes up, and we'll keep capital the same, and then what's going on is wages has gone down. And then what of course is going to happen is that, because that goes in to feed your population, your demand's going to drop off, so your revenue drops off, your costs are kind of the same. So then the question becomes, well, now you've got a drop off, what are you going to do? Where are we going to share the pain? I'll cut it off on wages, so that drops a bit further. And then, so your demand drops off, and then, we want to keep our profit where we are, we're good managers, so we'll keep our profit up here. oh, well, we might have to start dropping off capital now. But these two here play an important role in productivity. So then if you start to drop these off, you already would have been losing productivity here because people won't be going to, as a population, have less money for healthcare, less money for education, that sort of thing. And so their productivity will already be dropping, and now you're going to drop you're going to, like for instance, not upgrade or not maintain some machinery. So that's productivity is going to drop. And so then you're basically taking wealth out of the system, and then so your profits go up, and then you end up with what's the current situation, which is they call it secular stagnation. This plus, if you remember when I was talking about the spending, productive capacity, and inflation, and I said if you had a high population one, sometimes the government, or it's not even just for high population, there's times when the government doesn't spend, if you've got a productive capacity of 10 and your government's only spending 8, well, you sit below your inflation target, you don't have enough spending in the economy. So that plus this is how you get secular stagnation, which is just another fancy term for an underwhelming performance in your economy. But you do need an amount of this, because you need to basically have some motivation for there to be a private sector. So, but then again, it comes to you can operate within these bands. There's no real good indications on where these bands are, so it's not till you get into trouble that you tend to notice what's going on. Just to emphasise, that problem where you have the profits going too high, it doesn't always go that way either. You had a problem back in the 1970s. What happened? We had the opposite problem. You can have wages was too high, and then both of these, profit and capital, was getting squeezed, and that was then decreasing the productivity and harming the economy that way. So, like I said, there's deadbands you can operate within, and then if you go outside them, you start to get away from an optimum. So the society, the public, has to be aware that there's careful ranges where these things need to operate in, and look for the signs when we're going out of them, and bring things back under control. Again, like with the private sector, it's private, so the public has to, and it will tend to want to go up here to more profits. That's just how it is. So the public has to keep an eye out with its democratic voting power to make sure the government is keeping this sort of stuff in check and keeping these all well balanced. Right, that's enough on this Trident model. This should only be a simple one.